For over a decade, one man has shaped the future of China, a leader whose decisions influence billions of lives, a man who controls the world's second largest economy, commands one of the most powerful militaries. But how did Xi Jinping rise to power? And what makes him one of the most influential figures of the 21st century? From a forgotten outcast to the most powerful man in China, Xi's journey was not just about survival, it was about mastering the system that once destroyed his family. This is not just a political story, it's a lesson in power, strategy, and survival. Join us on this journey to uncover the fascinating story of Xi Jinping while improving your English comprehension through real-life storytelling. Stay tuned. Part 1: A Boy in the Shadow of Revolution. Xi Jinping was born on June 15, 1953 into a world of privilege and power. His father, Xi Zhongxun, was not just any communist official. He was one of the revolutionary heroes who had fought alongside Mao Zedong in the war that shaped modern China. This meant that young Xi was born into the Red aristocracy, a class of elite children raised within the corridors of power in Beijing's Zhongnanhai compound, the Chinese equivalent of the Kremlin. His childhood was one of comfort and prestige. He lived in a grand residence surrounded by the families of other top officials. Servants catered to the family's needs, and Xi had access to the best education China had to offer. He played with the children of fellow communist leaders, including those who would later become his political rivals and allies. The future seemed bright, but in 1962 everything changed. Xi Zhongxun, once a trusted ally of Mao, found himself accused of being a counter-revolutionary. In the brutal world of Chinese politics, loyalty could turn into betrayal overnight. He was purged from the party, stripped of his titles, and sent into political exile. For the 9-year-old Xi Jinping, the fall of his father was both confusing and terrifying. Overnight, his privileged life crumbled. His mother was interrogated. His family was shunned. Former friends turned their backs on them, fearing association with a disgraced official. And then came the Cultural Revolution, 1966 to 1976, a period of absolute chaos. Mao Zedong launched a nationwide purge to cleanse China of counter-revolutionaries. The infamous Red Guards, radicalized youth mobilized by Mao, roamed the streets, attacking teachers, intellectuals, and enemies of the revolution. Xi Jinping, the son of a disgraced official, became a target. At just 15 years old, Xi Jinping was dragged out of school and sent to the countryside as part of Mao's Down to the Countryside campaign. Millions of privileged youth from urban areas were forced to live and work among the rural poor, a supposed effort to re-educate them through hard labor. Xi was sent to Liangjie, a remote village in Shanxi province. It was a world unlike anything he had ever known. Beijing, with its palaces, paved streets, and endless political discussions, was gone. Instead, Xi found himself in an isolated, barren land surrounded by farmers who lived in cave dwellings carved into the yellow earth. The winters were bitterly cold and the summers were scorching. For the first time in his life, Xi Jinping was truly alone. The villagers did not welcome him with open arms. To them, he was just another spoiled city boy, clueless about the realities of rural life. The work was brutal. Digging ditches, carrying water, shoveling manure, and tending to crops. The food was meager. Coarse corn flour, wild vegetables, and whatever they could scavenge. Disease was rampant, and Xi himself fell ill several times. He later admitted that the suffering of those years was almost unbearable. Many other sent-down youth gave up, fled, or even took their own lives. But Xi Jinping was different. At first, he struggled. The villagers mocked him, calling him the weak one because he couldn't even carry a full bucket of water. The harsh environment pushed him to his limits, but he refused to break. Instead of complaining or trying to escape, he adapted. He started waking up earlier than everyone else to fetch water. He volunteered for the hardest tasks, digging latrines, carrying loads of heavy grain, and enduring back-breaking labor in the fields. Slowly, the villagers began to respect him. G didn't just work hard, he listened and learned. He paid attention to the elders, absorbing their knowledge of agriculture, rural struggles, and survival. Unlike many of his fellow city-born youth, he did not look down on the villagers. He wanted to understand them. One story tells of how Xi, despite his urban background, learned how to herd sheep, dig caves, and even repair tools. The boy who had once lived in a palace in Beijing now slept on a bed of straw covered in fleas. But hardship alone wasn't enough. Xi Jinping wanted more. While other sent-down youth gave up on the party, Xi became more determined to join it. In a time when many young intellectuals rejected the Communist Party, blaming it for their suffering, Xi Jinping did the opposite. He studied Mao's writings and read political philosophy by kerosene lamp. He memorized the party's slogans and teachings, preparing for the day when he could reclaim his place among China's leaders. However, there was one problem. His father's disgrace made him an outcast. G applied to join the Communist Party multiple times and was rejected again and again. His father's political downfall had stained his name. Many officials still saw him as the son of a traitor, but Xi refused to give up. Each time he was rejected, he simply applied again. He worked harder, proving his loyalty through actions rather than words. Finally, after 7 rejections, his persistence paid off. In 1974, Xi Jinping was accepted into the Chinese Communist Party. It was his first true victory and a sign of what was to come. By the time he left Liangjiahe, Xi Jinping was no longer the soft, privileged boy of Beijing. He had transformed into a hardened survivor, a man who had endured poverty, political exile, and humiliation, and emerged stronger. When he returned to the city, he carried the lessons of the countryside with him. He understood the pain of the common people, not through political theory, but through lived experience. It was a weapon that would serve him well in the future. Part 2. The Road to Redemption. With his foot finally in the door, Xi knew he had to move carefully. Every step had to be calculated. Every decision had to be perfect. His first move, education. In 1975, he enrolled at Tsinghua University, one of China's most prestigious institutions. But unlike most students who were focused solely on their studies, Xi had a different goal. He wasn't just learning about chemical engineering, the subject he was officially studying. He was studying something far more important: politics, strategy, power. At Tsinghua, Xi wasn't the smartest student in the room, but he was the most disciplined. He listened, observed, and built connections with influential figures. While others debated political theories, he focused on survival. He knew that China's real game of power wasn't played in classrooms. It was played in the corridors of the Communist Party. During his time at university, he never openly spoke against the party. Despite the suffering he had endured, many of his peers, bitter from the Cultural Revolution, criticized the government. Xi remained silent. He understood the rules of the game, and he had no intention of losing. By the time he graduated, Xi wasn't just another university student. He was a man on a mission. His first real political position came in 1979 when he was appointed as a personal secretary to Geng Biao, a senior military official. This was a strategic move. By aligning himself with someone in the military, Xi gained insight into China's defense policies, leadership structures, and most importantly, the art of loyalty. For the next few years, he worked behind the scenes, observing the inner workings of China's bureaucracy. Unlike many princelings who used their family names to demand power, Xi was patient. He worked tirelessly, proving himself to be disciplined, reliable, and above all, loyal to the party. But he knew that to truly rise, he had to get his hands dirty. That meant leaving the comfort of Beijing and proving himself in the provinces. In 1982, Xi requested to be sent to the countryside. This was unheard of for someone of his background. Most princelings fought to stay in Beijing, where power was concentrated. Xi did the opposite. He was sent to Jiangding County in Hebei province, a poor, struggling region where political careers often went to die. When he arrived, local officials didn't take him seriously. They saw him as another red prince from Beijing, expecting an easy ride. They were wrong. Xi immediately rolled up his sleeves and got to work. He spent long hours in the fields with farmers, discussing their struggles. He walked through muddy roads, meeting with village leaders. He personally oversaw infrastructure projects, proving that he wasn't just another bureaucrat issuing empty orders. Slowly, he won the people over. His leadership style was different from the flashy, arrogant officials they were used to. He was methodical, pragmatic, and above all, ruthless when needed. When corruption threatened local projects, Xi did not hesitate to remove officials no matter how powerful they were. This gained him a reputation as a no-nonsense leader, a reputation that would follow him for decades. And the party took notice. From Jiangding, Xi's rise was steady but relentless. By the late 1980s and 1990s, he held various positions in Fujian and Zhejiang provinces, overseeing economic reforms and development. He built a reputation as a leader who balanced modernization with party control, exactly what the CCP needed in the rapidly changing political landscape of China. Unlike other princelings who relied on their family names, Xi made sure he built his own power base. He surrounded himself with loyal allies, eliminating rivals quietly and efficiently. Each move he made was precise, each decision was deliberate. He had learned from his father's downfall. Never let your enemies see your true power until it is too late. And as the 2000s approached, his patience was about to pay off. In 2007, everything changed. The Chinese Communist Party was facing a crisis. Power struggles at the top had created uncertainty. The leadership needed someone reliable, disciplined, and most importantly, loyal to the party. They needed a leader who could be controlled, or so they thought. Xi Jinping fit the profile perfectly. That year, in a stunning political shakeup, he was unexpectedly promoted to the Politburo Standing Committee, the small elite group that ruled China. For most leaders, this would have been the pinnacle of their career. But for Xi Jinping, it was just the beginning, because now he was within striking distance of ultimate power. Part 3, the coronation of a supreme leader. The year was 2012. The Great Hall of the People in Beijing stood in anticipation. Inside, party elites, military generals, and the nation's most powerful figures gathered for a moment that would define China's future. Xi Jinping, dressed in a simple black suit, walked onto the grand stage. The room fell silent. Cameras flashed. The world watched. With a firm voice, the announcement was made. Xi Jinping was now the General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party. To outsiders, this was merely another power transition in the party's history, a routine passing of the torch. But for those who understood China's politics, something was different this time because Xi Jinping was no ordinary leader. He had spent decades climbing the ranks with quiet precision, learning from the mistakes of fallen politicians. He had no obvious enemies, no controversial past, and no scandals to haunt him. To many, he seemed like a leader the party could control, but they had underestimated him. Xi was about to launch one of the most ruthless political operations in modern history. And within a few years, he would reshape China in his own image. Shortly after taking power, Xi declared war on corruption. On the surface, it was a campaign to clean up China's bureaucracy, to remove greedy officials who had grown too comfortable in their positions. But in reality, this was much more than that. Xi's anti-corruption drive was a weapon. It was a purge in disguise. One by one, his rivals fell. Powerful figures like Zhou Yongkang, a former security chief, were arrested. Generals, billionaires, even once untouchable party members were taken down. Many were charged with corruption, others simply disappeared. By the time the dust settled, over 1 million officials had been punished. The message was clear. There were no more factions, no more competing voices, only Xi. This wasn't just about eliminating threats, it was about consolidating absolute power. And it worked. For the first time in decades, China had a leader who ruled with complete authority. But Xi wasn't done yet. He was about to reshape China itself. Xi understood that power wasn't just about political purges, it was about controlling the flow of information. The Chinese people would see only what he wanted them to see. Under his rule, the internet was placed under strict surveillance. Websites were censored, social media was monitored, and dissenting voices were silenced. State propaganda intensified. Schools, movies, and news channels promoted Xi's vision of a strong, unified China. Technology became a tool of control. Facial recognition, AI-driven surveillance, and digital monitoring ensured that loyalty was absolute. Even entertainment and culture were shaped by his ideology. Celebrities, businessmen, and artists were expected to show their devotion to the party or face consequences. By the time Xi was in his second term, he wasn't just a leader, he was an institution. But he still had one final move left. For decades, China's leadership had followed an unspoken rule. No leader would serve more than 2 terms. It was a safety measure, a way to prevent another dictator like Mao Zedong. But in 2018, Xi Jinping shattered that tradition. With a simple but powerful decision, he abolished presidential term limits. The message to the world was clear. Xi Jinping would rule indefinitely. There would be no successor, no power transition, no uncertainty. China's future would be guided by one man, one vision, one party. And to make sure of it, he secured his ultimate legacy. His name, Xi Jinping thought, was enshrined in the Chinese Communist Party constitution. Only 2 leaders in history had ever received this honor, Mao Zedong and Deng Xiaoping. Xi had officially entered the ranks of China's immortals. As of today, Xi Jinping remains the most powerful leader China has seen in decades. He has expanded China's global influence, built a modern surveillance state, and solidified the party's grip on every aspect of life. To his supporters, he is a visionary, a leader who restored China's strength and challenged Western dominance. To his critics, he is a dictator, a man who crushed democracy, silenced opposition, and made himself irreplaceable. But one thing is undeniable. Xi Jinping has rewritten history, and the world is still watching to see how his story will end. What do you think? Will Xi Jinping remain in power, or is his reign nearing its end? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to hit the like button, share this video, and subscribe for more incredible stories from history and power. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.